Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into the most epic, bizarre, and sometimes downright unbelievable deaths in history. Imagine the clash of spears in the darkness, a hail of arrows whistling through hot Mediterranean air, and the metallic taste of defiance sitting on your tongue. You're about to witness people who didn't just die, they performed their deaths like grand finales on the stage of time. And trust me, you probably won't survive this, unless you're extremely good at dodging history's sharp edges. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up a narrow mountain pass, the air heavy with heat and the scent of leather, sweat, and something coppery you don't want to think too hard about. The sun glares off your bronze helmet. Ahead of you, 299 other warriors shift silently, adjusting their shields and readying for what is, let's be honest, probably their last day on Earth. This is Thermopylae. The year is 480 BCE, and you're standing shoulder to shoulder with the Spartans, facing the overwhelming might of the Persian Empire. You can practically hear the drumbeat of Xerxes' army echoing off the cliffs. It's said he brought a force numbering in the hundreds of thousands, though historians still argue whether those numbers were greatly inflated by ancient bragging rights. But no matter what the true head count was, the difference in size between your group and theirs? Massive. Comically unfair. Like pitting a dodgeball team against an avalanche. And yet, King Leonidas doesn't flinch. Neither do you. Shield up. Spear ready. Welcome to one of the boldest last stands in human history. The narrow terrain works in your favor. The pass, whose name literally means hot gates, is wedged between steep cliffs and a sulfuric spring. You can smell it now, a faint rotten egg tang that only adds to the surreal drama. Here, only a small number of enemies can come through at once. Perfect for a phalanx formation. You press your shield tight against the next man's, forming a near-impenetrable wall. You breathe in slowly. Then you wait. When the first wave hits, it's chaos laced with choreography. Persian soldiers surge forward, only to be met with sharp, practiced jabs. Blood sprays. Screams rise. You lose track of time, minutes, hours, days. It all blurs in the dust and metal and muscle of battle. The Spartans don't break. What most people forget is that Leonidas didn't come here alone. Alongside the 300 were several thousand other Greeks, including thespians. No, not the dramatic arts kind, who also chose to stay and die. They rarely get the cinematic spotlight, but they were there, unarmored, vastly outmatched, and just as brave. And then, betrayal. A local named Ephialtes, you may want to hiss here, slinks into Persian lines and spills the secret of a goat path that flanks the Greek position. With this knowledge, Xerxes sends his elite immortals through the pass, and suddenly, your brilliant bottleneck is a trap closing in from behind. Leonidas knows what this means. So do you. Instead of retreating, he dismisses most of the allied troops, keeping only the Spartans and a handful of others. Not because you all have a death wish, though that's debatable, but because this final stand buys time for the Greek cities to prepare. Your death, apparently, is a strategic delay. Yea, you steel yourself. Day 2. Maybe 3. Your body is aching, your ears ringing. Every nerve screams at you to run, but your feet stay planted. Even when arrows blot out the sun, you remember the famous quote, "Then we shall fight in the shade." Quippy, considering you're being turned into a pincushion. Eventually, you're overwhelmed. There's no dramatic swell of music, no slow-motion heroics. Just blades, blood, and a sudden cold stillness. You fall. Around you, others fall. And even in the haze of death, you know something strange. You mattered. Because this was no anonymous death in the dirt. This was defiance. This was a message. Later, historians will argue whether the 300 changed the war or merely became symbolic martyrs. Some say their stand helped rally Greek forces for future victories like Salamis and Plataea. Others think the Persian threat was never as dire as dramatized. But what's not up for debate? The sheer audacity of it all. The way you stood in that narrow pass, eyes unblinking, while history sharpened its quill. Fun sidebar. Did you know that Spartan warriors supposedly used black soup made from pig's blood and vinegar as their daily fuel? Fringe historians claim it tasted like battery acid but made them fearless. Honestly, I'd want to die gloriously too if that was dinner. So now you lie beneath a pale sun, body broken but spirit carved into legend. And centuries from now, someone will whisper your story to help them sleep. You wake beneath a marble dome, echoes bouncing softly through a hall that smells faintly of polished stone and aging parchment. Your sandals scuff the floor, and every step you take is a whisper through history. The Ides of March have arrived, and you, my friend, are standing far too close to Julius Caesar. You glance at the senators around you, robes pristine, faces practiced in the art of smiling without meaning it. Caesar enters the chamber tall, confident, a little too smug for someone with that many enemies and 0 bodyguards. It's 44 BCE, and the man who styled himself dictator for life is about to learn the price of ambition. There's tension in the air, electric and unspoken. You feel it in your gut, the same way you sense a thunderstorm long before the first crack of lightning. Caesar, as usual, brushes off the bad omens. Never mind the soothsayer who warned him, beware the Ides of March. Never mind that his wife Calpurnia had a nightmare about blood pouring from his statue. Just casual ancient red flags. The Senate meeting begins. Caesar takes his seat. And then, it happens. One senator steps forward. Then, another. You notice the gleam of a dagger. And then, chaos. The first strike lands. Caesar turns, shocked. It's not a stranger, it's a friend. Brutus. That name alone will echo across centuries. Caesar's robes are slashed, his arms flailing as he tries to defend himself. But there are too many blades, too many hands. The conspirators close in like wolves. You don't count the stabs. Nobody really can. Ancient sources argue the number. 23? 35? Who had time to keep score? All you know is that Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, ends up crumpled on the floor at the base of Pompey's statue. Yes, that Pompey, his former rival, whose death Caesar had orchestrated. Oh, the irony. And here's a weird little twist. Historians still debate whether Caesar actually said, "Et Brute," or if that was just Shakespeare being peak dramatic. Some sources claim his last words were in Greek, "Kai su, teknon?" You too, child. A softer, more tragic note. Either way, you can't unsee the betrayal. Blood pools on the floor. The senators scatter like guilty schoolboys. The body lies motionless, robes soaked, one sandal missing. Here's where things get messy. Despite the conspirators' belief that killing Caesar would save the Republic, it does the exact opposite. Rome plunges into chaos. Civil wars erupt. Power-hungry leaders scramble for control, and spoiler alert, the Republic ends anyway. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, picks up the pieces and becomes the first emperor. So, mission not accomplished. Fun fact, Caesar's death was so dramatic that the Roman calendar was literally renamed in his honor. July. That's Julius's month, baby. And yes, he also gave us the term Caesarean section, though no, he was not born that way. Fringe legends say he was, but actual historians point out his mother lived long after his birth. Still, it's a persistent myth, like ancient tabloid gossip. After the assassination, Caesar's funeral becomes another performance. His ally Mark Antony gives a fiery speech, waving the bloody toga in front of the crowd like a magician's cape. Emotions boil over. The Roman people riot. The conspirators, thinking they'd be welcomed as heroes, find themselves hiding behind locked doors. You, meanwhile, are still standing in the Senate chamber. The room feels colder now. The marble has lost its luster. It's stained, not just with blood, but with the permanent mark of ambition's high cost. There's a lesson here, somewhere between the stabs and the statues. When power becomes personal, and politics turns into performance art, it's rarely the people who benefit. It's the stagehands, like you, left sweeping up the aftermath. And in case you're wondering, yes, Caesar's ghost does get a cameo later. He allegedly appears to Brutus before the Battle of Philippi, whispering, "You will see me at Philippi." Chilling. Shakespeare couldn't resist the supernatural flair, and neither could Roman rumor mills. You leave the chamber slowly, head spinning, the sound of sandals fading behind you. Outside, Rome bustles on. But something's shifted. The Republic has one foot in the grave, and Caesar's in there holding the door open. Velvet cushions. Gold-painted walls. The heady scent of lotus oil and crushed roses. You lounge in a chamber that hums with intrigue, the Nile's breath barely stirring the gauzy curtains. Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt, glides across the room in sandals softer than a whisper, her eyes lined like daggers, her movements rehearsed like a queen who knows the curtain's about to fall. You're not just witnessing a death, you're about to experience a finale crafted like theater, with props, mood lighting, and, yes, snakes. It's 30 BCE. Rome has marched closer, louder. Octavian, soon to be Augustus, is knocking on Alexandria's door, and Cleopatra has run out of pawns. Her beloved Mark Antony is gone, fallen on his sword in a tragic balcony mix-up that would make Shakespeare blush. He believed she was dead. She wasn't. Now she is. Well, almost. You follow Cleopatra into the mausoleum she's had prepared for herself, because of course she planned her death venue ahead of time. The place smells of incense and inevitability. Her servants flit around, silent and loyal to the bitter end. One of them hands her a small, woven basket. Inside, allegedly, an ASP, an Egyptian cobra, sleek and silent. But historians still argue whether it was actually a snake or something more pharmacological. Some suggest a poisoned hairpin. Others whisper about a fast-acting venom blend delivered through a scratch. The truth, like Cleopatra herself, is cloaked in enigma. She reclines on a divan. You watch her take a deep breath, brush a lock of hair from her face, and then, nothing dramatic. Just a pause. A moment so quiet you wonder if she changed her mind. Then her body stiffens, and her eyelids flutter. Death arrives gently, like the final note of a lyre fading into dusk. And yet the drama doesn't stop there. Octavian arrives and finds her dead. He's not thrilled. He wanted her alive, paraded through Rome in chains, a living trophy of conquest. But Cleopatra knew better. She wasn't going to be anyone's spectacle. This was a woman who'd spoken 9 languages, seduced 2 Roman titans, and ruled a kingdom with calculated grace. If she had to go, it would be on her terms. Did you know she wrote medical texts on cosmetics and perfumes? Or that she may have used a blend of donkey milk and crocodile dung as skincare? Fringe, yes, but apparently effective. Her complexion remains legendary. And that, somehow, feels on brand. Still, her death doesn't just close a life, it ends an era. Egypt, as an independent power, vanishes into Rome's expanding shadow. Cleopatra was the last of the Ptolemaic dynasty, descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. Her kingdom, once so dazzling, so independent, becomes a Roman province with a Roman name and Roman laws. You step outside into the courtyard where Egyptian sun bakes the stone. The statues stare ahead, unblinking, as if mourning. Somewhere in the distance, a caged lion roars, another symbol of power reduced to spectacle. It's not just Cleopatra who died today. It's the old world. The one of pharaohs and gods, of sphinxes and sacred rivers. That world is closing its eyes now, one lid at a time. And what about that snake? Whether real or legend, the image persists, a queen dying with a serpent at her breast, unafraid, almost amused. Maybe it's myth. Maybe it's metaphor. Maybe, like everything about her, it was pure performance. But standing in that cool, quiet tomb, you sense something else. Not sorrow, not fear. Something like control. Even in death, Cleopatra choreographed every detail. She turned her last breath into legacy. As you leave the room, your fingers brush the stone doorway. It's cool, worn smooth by time. You wonder if anyone will remember this exact spot in 1,000 years. Spoiler, they will. And her name will still shimmer with mystery, her exit still debated, dissected, dramatized. Because some people don't just die. They exit. And Cleopatra? She gave death an entrance cue. You're aboard a Viking longship slicing through icy water, your boots slipping on planks slick with sea spray and the remnants of something vaguely fishy. The sky is a gray bruise above, the wind sharp as an axe blade against your cheeks. You huddle your fur cloak tighter, watching as the horizon sharpens into a jagged shoreline, and with it, destiny. It's 10:30 CE, and you're headed for Norway, about to witness a death so dramatic it rewrote sainthood itself. At the center of it all is Olaf II Haraldsson, King of Norway, a man who went from outlaw to monarch to, wait for it, saint. And how he gets there. Not quietly, that's for sure. Olaf's early career reads like a Norse action movie, raiding, pillaging, sword-swinging across Europe. He fought for the English, rubbed elbows with the Normans, and eventually decided, you know what? I think I'll go convert Norway to Christianity. Because sure, that seems like a chill Sunday plan. Problem is, not everyone's excited about the new religion. Paganism runs deep here. The old gods still whisper in the forests and thunder in the mountains. When Olaf starts enforcing Christianity with, let's say, less than subtle methods, we're talking burning temples and outlawing pagan rituals, the resistance grows fierce. Eventually, Olaf is exiled. You'd think that'd be the end of the story, but no, he returns a year later with an army, determined to reclaim his throne. And that's how you end up here, boots on the ground at the Battle of Stiklestad. The field is soaked from rain, churned into mud by hundreds of stomping feet. Swords gleam. Shields rise. And Olaf, clad in a scarlet cloak, rides forward like someone who's read too many prophecies about themselves. The fighting is brutal, close, sweaty. You're pressed between bodies, barely able to breathe, let alone swing a weapon. Olaf charges. Arrows arc through the air. And then, you see it. The king falls. One blow cuts through his thigh. Another slices his neck. And the third, an axe to the gut, drops him cold. He dies right there, in the mire and mess of battle, surrounded not by priests or courtiers but by farmers and fighters who weren't entirely sure they wanted him back. Here's where things take a weird turn. His body is buried quickly, quietly, in a riverbank grave. But just 1 year later, it's exhumed, and according to accounts, it's miraculously preserved. His hair, still growing. His skin, fresh as snow. His scent, not rot, but roses. Historians still argue whether this was actual miracle or medieval PR stunt. Either way, the church wastes no time. Olaf is canonized, officially, in 1031. And boom, Saint Olaf is born. His cult spreads like wildfire. Pilgrimages begin. Churches pop up bearing his name, not just in Norway but across Scandinavia and even into Eastern Europe. A man once known for axe-wielding and temple-burning becomes the patron saint of, well, just about everything Nordic. You can't help but squint a little at the irony. Olaf's conversion campaign may have been bloody and forced, but his death gives it staying power. His sainthood turns a controversial king into a spiritual symbol. Fringe researchers point out that sainthood often worked this way in medieval politics. If someone died dramatically enough, preferably in battle, preferably for a cause, instant holiness. Fun tidbit. There's a statue of Saint Olaf at London's Southwark Cathedral, and he's holding an axe like he's still ready to go full Viking. Old habits die hard, apparently. Back on the battlefield, you walk past the spot where he fell. The mud has dried. Grass is creeping back. In the distance, a tiny wooden cross marks the place. Nothing flashy, just a reminder that here, in a tangle of limbs and legend, a man died and a myth was born. You wonder how many of those around him believed. Did they see glory in his fall? Or just another war lost in the mud? The rain starts again, soft and steady, like applause from the sky. You pull up your hood, glance once more at the field, and move on. Because even in history, some ghosts prefer to be followed. The desert heat breathes down your neck like an impatient god. The sand clings to your boots, and even the shadows seem to sweat. You're standing beneath the iron-bone silence of the Persian sun, where dust curls like incense, and executioners sharpen blades by muscle memory. Welcome to 480 BCE, just outside of Persepolis. You're in the court of Xerxes' I, watching a man walk straight into legend by not walking away. His name? Leonidas. Spartan king. 8-pack of abs probably sculpted by Olympus itself. And yes, the one from that movie. But tonight, we're going deeper than slow-mo abs and digitally enhanced chest hair. Leonidas leads a small force. Very small, actually. Just 300 Spartans, plus a few thousand allies who Hollywood forgot to mention, to block the Persian army at the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae. The odds? Terrible. The plan? Delay the Persians long enough for Greece to rally. The mood? Heroic, but also a little, we're definitely going to die. You stand along the cliffside pass. The sea crashes below like drums of war. The Persians arrive in waves, literally. Xerxes reportedly commands hundreds of thousands of troops. Historians still argue about the exact number. Could have been 100,000. Could have been closer to 2 million, according to Herodotus, who, to be fair, never met a fact he didn't want to exaggerate. But here's the wild thing. For 2 straight days, Leonidas and his men hold them off. Spears pierce. Shields rattle. Arrows darken the sun, prompting that now immortal Spartan reply. Then we shall fight in the shade. You can't help but grin. That's ancient sarcasm at its finest. The pass funnels the Persian army, stripping them of their numbers advantage. It's like trying to shove an elephant through a doggy door. And the Spartans, trained from childhood to fight, bleed, and die with style. You watch them push back line after line, their capes snapping like crimson flags. But then betrayal slithers in, as it always does. A Greek named Ephialtes reveals a secret path around the cliffs. The Persians outflank the Spartans. Leonidas knows what this means. He sends most of his allies away. Only the 300 remain, along with a small band of Thespians and Thebans. The final stand begins. You watch Leonidas remove his helmet. No speeches, no drama. Just a quiet readiness. The kind that seeps into your bones. He fights like a man already halfway to Hades. He dies surrounded, body riddled with wounds. The Persians take his head and nail it to a spike, a gruesome postscript to a legend. But it backfires. Leonidas becomes the rallying cry Greece needs. A few months later, at the Battle of Salamis, the Greeks crush the Persian navy. Then at Plataea, the Persian army breaks. The invasion collapses. Freedom, however fragile, is preserved. And Leonidas? They build him a monument. A stone lion, standing over the spot where he fell. The inscription, short and sharp. Go, tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. Quirky side note. Modern Sparta has a bronze statue of Leonidas near its stadium. Locals dress it with a fresh red cloak every year. Even in death, he gets wardrobe updates. You crouch near the old battlefield, tracing a finger through the dry dust. The wind kicks up, stinging your eyes. Not from emotion, of course. Just sand. Definitely just sand. Because you're not crying. Spartans don't cry, right? The story lingers in your chest like the echo of a war horn. A death that turned defeat into defiance, a grave that planted the seeds of unity. The Persians left with thousands of bodies. Greece kept one unshakable legend. You turn from the pass, the sun low behind the cliffs. Leonidas may be gone, but his stand remains, a stubborn scar carved into the mountains. The winds over the Scottish Highlands moan like they remember every betrayal ever whispered in a stone hall. You're trudging through mist, boots squelching through wet heather, the air thick with the smell of peat smoke and the vague threat of bagpipes. At the top of the hill, the shadow of a man waits, his hair tangled, his armor dented, his destiny sharpened like a claymore. Say hello to William Wallace. Freedom fighter, rebel, and, yes, the one with the face paint and the freedom yell that's been echoing through pop culture since Braveheart. Except the real man? Even more intense. And his death. A masterclass in medieval vengeance. We're in 1305 now. Wallace has spent years turning English supply lines into firewood. His guerrilla campaign after the Battle of Stirling Bridge gave Scotland real hope. But after a crushing defeat at Falkirk, and some complicated political beef with fellow Scottish nobles, he's forced into hiding. Captured near Glasgow by a Scottish knight loyal to the English crown, Wallace is carted off to London like a prize boar. The sentence isn't just death. It's treason. And in medieval England, that's a whole other level of theatrical. You find yourself in Smithfield, just outside the city. A crowd swells like it's festival day. Children are on shoulders. Merchants are selling meat pies. There's even a juggler. Apparently, executions are peak weekend entertainment. Wallace is dragged through the mud behind horses. His ankles are chained. His mouth silent. They've already stripped him of his title, lands, and reputation. Now comes the part no one forgets. They hang him. Not until dead, just long enough for the pain to register. Then they cut him down, stretch him on a table, and, well, let's just say they remove certain organs with surgical enthusiasm. PG-13 mode, engaged. The English believe they're sending a message. You, standing in the crowd, feel something different. Wallace doesn't scream, doesn't beg. Legend says he shouts freedom with his final breath. Historians still argue if that's poetic license or real, but honestly, it hardly matters. The crowd is stunned. Silence spreads like fog. And then it gets messier. Wallace's body is chopped into pieces. His head ends up on London Bridge, stuck on a pike. His limbs are sent to Newcastle, Perth, Berwick, and Stirling, like gruesome postcards reading, "Don't rebel, or else." But, plot twist, it doesn't work. Within 9 years, Scotland, under Robert the Bruce, declares independence at the Battle of Bannockburn. The brutality of Wallace's death only fuels the fire. He becomes a martyr, a saint of sorts, not the halo kind, but the blood and thunder variety. Fringe historians point out that Wallace was probably never the actual leader of all Scotland. He wasn't even from noble birth. Just a knight's son with a sword and a grudge. But that's the power of myth. Once people start carving your face into pub signs and body armor, you've moved from man to symbol. Fun tidbit. Wallace's sword still exists. Kind of. It's housed at the National Wallace Monument near Stirling, and it's taller than some toddlers. Whether it's actually his or just a ceremonial stand-in is debated. But let's be honest, it feels right. You sit down on a cold stone bench nearby. The crowd has gone home. The square is quiet. A few scraps of fabric blow across the cobblestones. And above, the Tower of St. Bartholomew's casts a long shadow across the site. It's not a battlefield. There's no army here. Just one man who wouldn't back down, and a country that remembered that. The English tried to erase him. Instead, they built his legend. And as the wind cuts across the square, you swear you hear it again. Not a scream, but a word. Faint. Defiant. Freedom. You're not sure what hits you first. The smell of the Tiber River at low tide, or the realization that the Roman Forum is somehow both majestic and falling apart. Broken marble columns claw at the sky, and the cobblestones beneath your feet feel worn thin by 1,000 sandals and 1,000,000 secrets. This is ancient Rome, and tonight, you're shadowing a man who probably should have taken a different route to work. Julius Caesar. You've heard of him. The name rings with empire, salads, and betrayal. But this isn't the Caesar of golden wreaths and famous orations. This is the Caesar who walks into a Senate meeting one fine March morning in 44 BCE and doesn't walk back out. Let's set the scene. Caesar has returned from a whirlwind of military victories. Gaul, conquered. Pompey, defeated. The Republic, definitely wobbling on its last legs. He's declared dictator for life, which, if you're keeping score, is not a great way to win popularity contests in a government built on shared power. You follow him as he strides through the theater of Pompey. Ironic, considering Pompey was his former ally turned enemy. The Senate has gathered here temporarily, while renovations happen at the usual Senate house. Caesar's friends, Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, all greet him like it's just another day. But it's not. Historians still argue whether Caesar suspected the plot. Some say he dismissed his guards that morning. Others think he had premonitions. Suetonius even claims a seer warned him to beware the Ides of March. But Caesar, being Caesar, probably shrugged it off like, "I've got reforms to pass." Inside, the conspirators swarm. Toga-clad senators close in. One grabs his shoulder, another stabs. Then, another. And another. You freeze. It's chaos. Daggers flash like lightning in a summer storm. Caesar tries to fight back with a stylus, a glorified pen, but it's useless. He stumbles, blood spilling onto the polished floor. The final blow comes, legend says, from Brutus. Et Brute? Caesar gasps. Then fall, Caesar. Did he actually say that? Or is it Shakespeare's flourish echoing down the centuries? Scholars bicker over it. What's certain is this: Caesar dies beneath the statue of Pompey, surrounded by friends, each one with a knife and a justification. You glance around the chamber. The killers scatter like rats from torchlight. There's no cheer, no triumph, only a chill that sinks into the marble. Rome, the eternal city, just blinked. The aftermath? Predictably, a dumpster fire. Far from restoring the Republic, Caesar's assassination shatters it. Civil wars erupt. Mark Antony and Octavian, later Augustus, chase down the assassins. The killers, Brutus and Cassius, end up dead by their own hands just a couple years later. And the Republic, gone. Replaced by an empire ruled by emperors who never forget what happens when power feels insecure. Caesar's funeral is pure Roman drama. His body is laid out in the Forum. A wax effigy of his mutilated corpse is spun on a pole so the crowd can see every wound, 23 in total. One even punctured his heart. Rome mourns. Rome riots. Rome crowns his adopted heir, Octavian, with the keys to the future. Quirky sidebar: you know that month July? That's him. Caesar literally got his own chunk of the calendar. That's how deep his shadow runs. And the spot where he died? You can still visit it today. It's part of the Largo di Torre Argentina, now a cat sanctuary. Yes, really. Dozens of furry little emperors sunbathe among the ruins, blissfully unaware they're napping on one of history's bloodiest turning points. You step outside, blinking in the sunlight. The Forum is loud again, bustling with market chatter and donkey carts. But something lingers in the air. A whisper. A warning. Absolute power doesn't end quietly. It ends with knives. The snow crunches beneath your boots like brittle parchment, and your breath hangs in the Russian air like a ghost that knows it's not going to make it. The year is 1916, and you're trudging through the frigid alleys of Petrograd, then known as St. Petersburg, capital of an empire cracking from within. You don't know it yet, but you're about to witness one of history's weirdest, most drawn-out, and over-the-top deaths. Meet Grigory Rasputin. Mystic, healer, beard enthusiast, and, depending on who you ask, either a holy man or the devil's in turn. He's become dangerously close to the royal family, especially Tsarina Alexandra, who believes Rasputin's strange powers are the only thing keeping her hemophiliac son, Alexei, alive. His influence spreads like mold in a damp palace, and the Russian elite? Not fans. They see him as a corrupt peasant with too much access to imperial ears, and rumors fly. Rasputin drinks, womanizes, and, according to some whispers, bathes maybe once a fortnight. So they decide to kill him. You're outside the Yusupov Palace, where a group of nobles led by Prince Felix Yusupov and Grand Duke Dmitry have set the scene. The basement is prepared with absurd dedication: wine, cakes, cyanide-laced pastries, and a gramophone playing Yankee Doodle Dandy on repeat, because nothing says assassination like a bit of American flair. Rasputin arrives, lured by the promise of a midnight snack and possibly flirtation. He snacks. He drinks. He doesn't die. The conspirators stare at each other. Those pastries were supposed to kill a horse. Historians still argue whether the poison even made it into his system. One theory: the heat from baking destroyed the cyanide. Another: Rasputin was immune, either through constant exposure or sheer unholy stubbornness. Panic sets in. So Felix grabs a revolver and shoots Rasputin in the chest. Finally, success. Nope. Rasputin collapses, then sits back up. According to Yusupov, Rasputin lunges forward, muttering something like, "You bad boy," which, to be fair, might have been terrifying in a dim Russian basement. Another shot. Then another. Then a beating with a steel club for good measure. And finally, they roll him up in a carpet and toss him into the icy Neva River. His body is pulled from the water days later. Early reports claim he died by drowning, though later autopsies suggest that's not true. Still, the image of a man who refused to die has already taken root. You lean over the riverbank, watching the current swirl like it's washing away secrets. Rasputin's death is more than murder, it's a prelude to collapse. Within months, the Tsar abdicates. The Romanovs are imprisoned. And the Russian Revolution bursts like a storm through every crack the empire had ignored. Quirky fact: the name Rasputin loosely translates to debauched one. Appropriate, sure, but also oddly poetic. His whole existence blurs the lines between mysticism, manipulation, and mayhem. And here's the kicker: people still argue whether Rasputin was evil or just opportunistic. Was he healing Alexei with hypnosis, herbal remedies? Or was it the simple comfort of belief? Scholars still debate that. But one thing's for sure: his murder was as chaotic and dramatic as his life. You pull your coat tighter. Snowflakes gather on your shoulders like tiny white flags. Somewhere, a street performer plays a violin under a flickering lamppost. The notes float through the night, a lullaby for the mad monk who wouldn't die right. Or maybe he just didn't want to. You're standing on a sun-baked balcony in Sarajevo, and the pigeons aren't the only ones who seem suspicious. The air tastes like metal, and somewhere, a car engine rattles unevenly. Down the street, a parade of dignitaries glides through the city, waving like it's just another June day in 1914. It is not. Because that man in the car, tipping his hat with regal stiffness? That's Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. And the guy with the weirdly intense stare near the bridge? That's Gavrilo Princip. teenage revolutionary, tuberculosis patient, and the human domino who's about to tip the world into war. It starts clumsily. The Archduke and his wife Sophie arrive in Sarajevo for a goodwill visit. But the route has been published in the papers, a security nightmare by modern standards, and a group of Serbian nationalists, known as the Black Hand, lie in wait with pistols and grenades. The first assassination attempt goes sideways. A bomb is thrown but bounces off the car and explodes under the vehicle behind them. Several officers are injured, but Franz Ferdinand? Mildly annoyed. He continues to City Hall, delivers a speech, probably with a "what a morning" opener, then decides he wants to visit the wounded men in the hospital. Cue fate's comedic timing. Someone forgets to inform the driver of the new route. The motorcade takes a wrong turn, right into a narrow street, right past a deli, and right in front of Gavrilo Princip, who had, by all accounts, gone to get a sandwich after the earlier failure. Seriously. Historians still argue whether he was there deliberately or just sulking with lunch in hand. But he sees the Archduke, seizes the moment, steps forward and fires 2 shots. One hits Sophie in the abdomen. One hits Franz Ferdinand in the neck. The Archduke reportedly murmurs, "Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children," as blood soaks his uniform. Within minutes, both are gone. You freeze. The street goes silent. It doesn't feel like the spark of something world-ending. It feels like a bad accident. But that bullet doesn't just kill a royal couple, it cracks the fault lines of Europe. Austria-Hungary blames Serbia. Germany backs Austria. Russia backs Serbia. France backs Russia. Britain gets involved when Belgium is invaded. It's like watching a row of champagne glasses tumble, except instead of bubbles, there's mustard gas and machine guns. World War I begins. Over 20 million lives will end. All because of a sandwich and 2 bullets. The spot where Franz Ferdinand fell is now marked by a small plaque and a quiet sense of, "Are you kidding me?" You sit near the Latin Bridge, pigeons cooing overhead, and wonder how such a small act triggered such enormous consequences. Quirky detail. Princip was arrested on the spot. Since he was under 20, he couldn't be executed under Austro-Hungarian law. Instead, he got 20 years in prison, where he slowly died of tuberculosis and malnutrition. His final years were spent chained to a wall, missing limbs from gangrene, haunted by what he'd done. And yet, some still view him as a nationalist hero. Others see him as a naive pawn. Historians still argue whether he truly understood what would follow. One death usually ends a story. This one started the bloodiest chapter yet. You glance down at your reflection in the water below the bridge. It's not the bullet that echoes. It's the silence after. You're sweating in the jungle now, the air thick with humidity and tension. Somewhere nearby, a cicada drones lazily, oblivious to the fact that you've just stepped into the final hours of one of the most infamous deaths in modern warfare. You wipe your brow, trying to keep your footing on the uneven rocks. The date is October 8, 1967. You're in Bolivia. And the man crouched in the brush ahead of you, exhausted and cornered, is Che Guevara. Yes, that Che, poster boy for revolutions, walking contradiction, and the only Marxist to ever become a global fashion icon. But tonight? There's no cigar, no speech, no grand finale. Just a revolutionary leader with a busted rifle and a broken radio, trapped in a ravine with a handful of loyal men and the Bolivian army closing in like a bad punchline. Che's journey to this moment is its own whirlwind. Born in Argentina, trained as a doctor, transformed by poverty and injustice across Latin America. He links up with Fidel Castro, helps overthrow Batista in Cuba, and becomes a minister of, well, pretty much everything. Banking, industry, war. The man multitasks his way through a revolution. But then he disappears. Officially, he resigns his Cuban posts in 1965. Unofficially, he's bouncing through Africa and then Bolivia, trying to light more revolutionary fires. The plan: train local rebels, topple the Bolivian government, inspire continental revolution. The problem: Bolivia isn't Cuba. The terrain is harsh. The villagers aren't interested. And the CIA is paying attention. You crouch beside him now, as he limps through the ravine. He's sick. Asthma's been gnawing at his lungs. His boots are falling apart. His beard is matted. The Bolivian army closes in, tipped off by a local informant. One of Che's men is captured. Then, another. And finally, Che himself is wounded in a firefight and taken alive. They bring him to a schoolhouse in the village of La Higuera, a crumbling, one-room structure with cracked adobe walls. He's held there overnight, chained by the wrists, reportedly speaking calmly to his captors. Tell Fidel he will soon see a triumphant revolution in America, he says to one. Tell my wife to remarry and be happy. Historians still argue over what happened next. Did the Bolivians want to put him on trial? Did the CIA order the execution? Or was the decision made in a moment of fear and pragmatism? Either way, the next day, Sergeant Mario Terán is chosen to carry out the deed. He's nervous. Understandably. The plan is not to shoot Che in the head, it needs to look like he died in battle. So Terán fires into his legs first. Che doesn't beg. He doesn't scream. He just looks the man in the eye and says, "Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." And he does. You step back, the jungle pressing in. The body is tied to the landing skids of a helicopter and flown to nearby Valle Grande, where it's laid out in a hospital laundry room. Reporters and soldiers come to gawk. Photographs are taken. His eyes are wide open, eerily serene. The image spreads worldwide, evoking comparisons to Christ, arms splayed, hair tousled, beard unbowed. A myth is born in that laundry room. Quirky twist. Terán later receives eye surgery decades later from a team of Cuban doctors, anonymously funded by an organization named after Che. A strange footnote in a story already soaked in irony. And his hands. Cut off and sent to Argentina for fingerprint confirmation. His body disappears, buried in an unmarked grave by the Bolivian military. For 30 years, no one knows where he rests. Until 1997, when his remains are discovered and flown to Cuba, where he's reburied in Santa Clara with full revolutionary honors. You sit on a mossy stone outside the schoolhouse ruins. Today, it's a memorial. Quiet. Still. The jungle has reclaimed the blood and bullets. But Che's face still stares from murals, graffiti, t-shirts, coffee mugs. A man who wanted to erase capitalism accidentally became its most ironic mascot. Was he a hero? A zealot? A murderer? A dreamer? Scholars still debated over black coffee and red flags. But on this night, in this jungle, he's just a man who wouldn't quit, until the jungle, the bullets, and history said otherwise. The revolution didn't die with Che. But something very human did. You find yourself squinting under a scorching desert sun, boots sinking into the sand of ancient Egypt. But not the Hollywood kind, no pyramids in sight, no golden chariots. Just a bleak, endless horizon and the final pitiful march of one of Rome's most brilliant minds. The year is 30 BCE, and the air crackles with loss. You are standing just outside a palace in Alexandria, and the world's most iconic love affair is about to meet its tragic, poetic end. Mark Antony and Cleopatra, the political power couple of their time. Equal parts charisma and chaos. But you didn't come here for candlelit dinners and perfumed chambers. You came for how they die, and it is as operatic as it gets. The Roman Empire is tearing itself in two, thanks to a beef between Antony and his former bro, Octavian. The Battle of Actium doesn't go Antony's way. His fleet is outmaneuvered, outgunned, and, some say, outfoxed by Cleopatra's decision to retreat mid-fight. Historians still argue whether it was a tactical move or pure panic. Either way, it marks the beginning of the end. Now, Antony is holed up in Alexandria, losing men, losing ground, and, perhaps, losing his mind. Word arrives that Cleopatra is dead. He believes it instantly. Doesn't double-check. Just takes a deep, melodramatic breath, turns to his servant, and says, essentially, "Well, time to die." He falls on his own sword. Problem is, he doesn't die immediately. He botches it. Instead of a clean death, he collapses in agony, bleeding and flailing. That's when someone rushes in and shouts the worst possible update. Actually, she's alive. Cue the groan of a dying general. He demands to be taken to her. You're there now, watching as a mortally wounded Mark Antony is hauled up a wall into Cleopatra's sealed mausoleum because she won't open the doors to let Roman soldiers in. They tie ropes around him and lift his bleeding body like a sack of tragic potatoes. Cleopatra, in tears, cradles him as he dies in her arms. The scene is pure Shakespeare, even though the bard wouldn't be born for another 1,500 years. But the story doesn't end there. Cleopatra knows what's coming. Octavian is marching in, and she's got no illusions about her fate. She won't be paraded through Rome in chains. She won't be Octavian's prize. So she prepares the ultimate final act. She dresses in her finest robes, adorns herself with jewelry, and arranges to be locked inside her mausoleum with two handmaidens. The exact details? Fuzzy. Legend says she smuggles in a venomous asp, either in a basket of figs or tucked in with her clothes. She allows it to bite her, and the poison shuts her body down, slow and cold. Her handmaidens die beside her. But, and here's the scholarly curveball, historians still argue whether it was really a snakebite. Some suggest poison. Others suspect a sharp hairpin laced with toxins. The only thing everyone agrees on? Cleopatra went out on her own terms, and her death closed the door on over 3,000 years of Egyptian pharaonic rule. You walk through the remains of her palace, now mostly submerged beneath the Mediterranean. Divers still explore it, brushing sand from fallen columns and toppled sphinxes. Her tomb has never been found, though some believe it lies beneath a temple to Isis. Or maybe she wanted it lost forever, hidden like the secrets she took to her grave. Quirky twist. Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian, she was Greek, descended from Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals. She just embraced the culture so fully, learning the language, worshipping the gods, that the people loved her like one of their own. A queen, a linguist, a strategist, and, depending on your source, a master of dramatic exits. You watch the sun set over Alexandria. The sky bleeds orange and violet, a royal farewell. Cleopatra and Antony's deaths are the stuff of legend, sculpted in marble and memory. Two people who tried to defy empires, and lost. But oh, what an exit! Now you're standing on a wooden platform in the middle of revolutionary France, and the crowd below you is electric, buzzing not with celebration, but with bloodlust. It smells like sweat, piss, and fresh bread, Paris in 1793. And standing beside you, eyes hollow but back straight, is Marie Antoinette, the most famous head about to roll in history. Once the darling of Versailles, now she's here, humbled, bruised, and stepping into her death like it's just another courtly performance. The guillotine awaits. You glance behind you. The reign of terror is in full swing. The French Revolution, once an idealistic uprising for liberty, equality, and fraternity, has veered into full paranoia. Nobles are hunted. Clergy executed. Neighbors denounce neighbors. Even the revolutionaries start turning on each other like drunk roommates arguing over rent. Marie Antoinette, Queen of France, daughter of the Habsburgs, and wife of the recently guillotined Louis XVI, is the revolution's biggest villain. Or, depending on how much bread you had this week, its biggest scapegoat. Let them eat cake, she supposedly said. But historians still argue whether she ever uttered those words. Probably not. It was a snarky quote from a novel written years before she even arrived in France. But it stuck, and so did the myth of the frivolous queen who partied while her people starved. Quirky detail. Marie Antoinette loved fashion and tiny dogs, yes, but she was also deeply involved in politics behind the scenes, writing secret letters to foreign powers, trying to broker deals, save her children, and protect the crumbling monarchy. Some saw her as a spy, others as a desperate mother. But now, she's just one more prisoner in a threadbare dress, hair hacked short to make the blade's job easier. The ride to the scaffold is rough. They shove her into a wooden cart, once used to carry manure, and parade her through the streets of Paris. People throw insults. Some throw garbage. She keeps her gaze ahead. You follow her up the steps. She stumbles once, steps on her executioner's foot and apologizes. "Pardon me, monsieur. I did not mean to do it." A strange final act of politeness, whispered under a gray October sky. She lies down, face pressed to the wood. The crowd leans in. The blade drops. Silence, then a cheer. Another symbol destroyed. But the echoes of her life cling to Versailles like perfume. She was married at 14, queen at 19, reviled by 30, and dead at 37. Through it all, she was judged not just for her power, but for how she looked wielding it. For the wigs, the diamonds, the gossip, and perhaps worst of all, for being foreign, female, and outspoken in a France that would sooner decapitate than debate. After her death, the crowds moved on. Heads kept falling, Robespierre's included. The revolution, like so many before and after, began to devour itself. The guillotine lost its novelty. The blood dried. The monarchy returned eventually, but never quite the same. You stand in front of what remains of the Place de la Révolution, now the Place de la Concorde. No trace of the scaffold remains. Tourists sip espresso where heads once thudded. But if you close your eyes, you can almost hear the rustle of her skirts, the clink of pearls, the scrape of wheels over cobblestones. Marie Antoinette didn't die a villain, nor a saint. Just a woman caught between centuries, revolutions, and public opinion. And the guillotine? Cold, quick, efficient, like history itself. The air is salty and damp now, clinging to your skin like regret. You're standing on a battered warship in the chilly waters of the Baltic Sea, and your boots echo over the deck as you approach the dying place of a man who is equal parts genius, tyrant, and accidental martyr. It's 1725, and Russia is about to lose one of its boldest rulers, Peter the Great. He's not bleeding, not beheaded, not riddled with arrows in some glorious battlefield blaze. No. Peter the Great is about to die in a way that feels almost mundane. But the ripples of his death? Titanic. You find him groaning in his chambers, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who looked like he could bench press a cannon. But now, he's curled in pain, belly distended, eyes sunken. For weeks, he's been suffering from a blocked bladder, a deadly infection, and what sounds like full-blown uremic poisoning. And all of this might have started, of course, because he tried to rescue some drowning soldiers in icy water a few weeks prior. Peter jumps into frigid waves like he's in a naval commercial, heroically pulling people from a capsized boat near Lochta. Admirable. Brave. Also, not great for a man already dealing with internal problems. He gets sick almost immediately after. His health declines fast. And on February 8, 1725, Russia's 6 feet 8 inches reformer king, yes, 6'8", finally succumbs to infection. No screaming. No assassination. Just the steady collapse of an overworked, overstretched giant. And yet, even in death, Peter manages to be loud. This is the man who westernized Russia like he was renovating a medieval house with a sledgehammer. He built a navy from scratch, modernized the army, introduced new education systems, shaved the beards off his nobles, literally, and moved the capital from Moscow to a half-swampy stretch of land that became St. Petersburg. Historians still argue whether he was a visionary or a violent control freak. Spoiler. Probably both. He once had his own son tortured to death for suspected treason. That's not a parenting win. But Peter wasn't just modernizing for fun. He saw Russia as backward, isolated, and on the verge of obsolescence. So he dragged it, sometimes kicking and screaming, into the 18th century. He learned shipbuilding in the Netherlands, disguised himself as a common laborer, and brought Western science, fashion, and customs back home. Quirky detail. Peter hated small talk. He was famously awkward at courtly banter and would sometimes blurt out odd, inappropriate comments at diplomatic gatherings just to shake things up. And he had a serious thing for collecting teeth. He kept a personal stash of pulled teeth in a box, like some kind of Enlightenment-era tooth fairy with boundary issues. You're in his palace now. The walls are lined with maps, instruments, books, tools of a ruler obsessed with knowing and controlling everything. But there's something about the silence after his death that feels uneasy. See, Peter never officially named a successor. In a twist of imperial chaos, his wife, Catherine I, becomes the first woman to rule Imperial Russia. Not a bad legacy. Build an empire so strong your widow picks up the scepter. But succession isn't smooth. The reforms Peter shoved into place start to fray. Bureaucrats cling to their wigs. Nobles push back. And without Peter's towering figure looming over everything, the future suddenly feels fragile. You walk the halls of the Peter and Paul fortress, where his body lies in a gleaming sarcophagus, surrounded by marble angels. His city, St. Petersburg, still stands, a strange mix of European elegance and Slavic soul. The canals shimmer. The bridges arch. It is, in every stone and shadow, his monument. No glorious battlefield death. No final blaze of glory. Just a man who burned so brightly in life that when he fell, the empire flickered. And still, for a moment, everything was quiet. You're deep in the forests of South America now, boots sinking into moss, the buzz of insects droning like static around your ears. The air smells of damp leaves and smoke. It's 1541, and the trees part to reveal one of the most bizarre and grim endings to a conquistador's life. Francisco de Orellana, a man who discovered the Amazon River, and then died trying to conquer it. You're not here for glory, though. You're here to watch it unravel. Orellana's death isn't swift. It's not theatrical. It's slow, humiliating, and tangled in mud, disease, and hubris. He dies of illness on a jungle expedition so doomed it feels scripted. But it wasn't. It was just very, very human. Let's rewind a bit. Francisco de Orellana starts strong. He's one of those ambitious Spaniards chasing gold, glory, and vaguely Catholic justifications for conquest. In 1541, he sets out with his cousin Gonzalo Pizarro. Yes, one of those Pizarros, to find the mythical El Dorado. They're told it lies east, somewhere beyond the Andes. Just a light jungle stroll away, obviously. Spoiler, they are wildly unprepared. The journey quickly turns into a mess of starvation, mutiny, and hallucinations. They run out of food, eat their horses, then eat their dogs, then maybe each other. Though historians still argue whether cannibalism actually occurred or was exaggerated by later writers trying to add spice to the failure. Eventually, Orellana splits from Pizarro, builds a makeshift boat, and drifts down a massive river. That river. The Amazon. He becomes the first European to navigate its full length. Along the way, he records tales of warrior women, possibly a misinterpretation, or maybe just sharp-shooting locals who didn't appreciate Spanish hospitality. Either way, he names the river after the legendary Amazons of Greek myth. A little dramatic, maybe, but branding matters. And yet, despite this epic achievement, Orellana's second Amazon expedition is what does him in. In 1546, he convinces the Spanish crown to let him return to conquer the region. He sets sail with 300 men, a few women, and absolutely no clue what he's getting into. Quirky side note. He brings along a trained falcon, because nothing says practical jungle survival like medieval bird flair. Things fall apart fast. The shipwrecks pile up. The supplies rot. His men die of fever, starvation, or simple despair. The Amazon, for all its grandeur, does not care about your titles or your crown. The jungle always wins. Eventually, Orellana collapses on the muddy banks of a nameless tributary, exhausted, delirious, and likely riddled with malaria. Some say he dies hallucinating about gold. Others believe he simply gives up. No glorious last stand. Just the slow fade of a man who thought he could conquer nature. You look around and see the remnants of the failed expedition, bones half buried in the soil, armor rusting into the roots. The jungle has already begun its quiet reclamation. Historians still debate what Orellana really saw on that first voyage. Were there once massive Amazonian cities? Advanced societies that later collapsed from disease and colonization? Recent research using LiDAR suggests the jungle might still be hiding the ruins of once thriving civilizations, buried under centuries of green. But Orellana never lived to see validation. His name went into the history books, yes, but his bones stayed behind, unnamed and forgotten in the underbrush. You pause near the riverbank, watching the water swirl with secrets. Somewhere beneath that current, the dreams of empires sink like stones. He came chasing a legend. He left as one. Not all epic deaths come with fireworks. Sometimes they just come with rain, mud, and a silence so complete it swallows you whole. You're standing on the deck of a cold, steel warship now. This time, not in the jungle or on palace marble, but drifting in the Pacific Ocean under a wide, indifferent sky. The year is 1945, and the world has never been louder. Explosions. Sirens. Static from radios that crackle with both command and desperation. This is where Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's story ends, not with a roar from a battleship gun, but with a calculated strike from halfway across the globe. It's one of the most chillingly precise assassinations in military history. Yamamoto isn't just any target. He's the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack, the commander-in-chief of Japan's combined fleet, and arguably the sharpest strategist on either side of the Pacific War. He's respected by allies, feared by enemies, and carries the weight of Japan's ambitions on his stoic shoulders. And, ironically, he didn't even want the war. That's the twist. Yamamoto studied in the US, gambled in smoky cardrooms in Chicago, and understood the full weight of American industrial power. He warned Japan's high command that war with the US would be a long, grinding loss. But when the decision came down, he followed orders. Historians still argue whether his loyalty helped delay Japan's collapse, or prolonged the suffering. What's not up for debate? His end. In April 1943, American codebreakers intercept a transmission. Yamamoto is touring the Solomon Islands to boost morale. Exact locations. Exact times. It's rare intelligence, so rare it feels like a cheat code. The U.S. greenlights Operation Vengeance. A squad of Lockheed P-38 Lightnings is dispatched to intercept his plane over Bougainville. You're in one of those planes now, throttling low over the trees. The squadron spots two Mitsubishi G-4M Betty bombers, flanked by fighter escorts. They pick the one that looks more decorated, figuring it's Yamamoto's ride. They're right. The attack is fast, brutal, surgical. Gunfire rips through the bomber's engines. It spirals, flaming, into the jungle below. A thud. Then silence. When Japanese troops reach the wreck, they find Yamamoto still in his seatbelt, his gloved hand resting calmly on the hilt of his sword. His face untouched, body composed, as if caught mid-thought. A physician would later report that he was killed instantly by a bullet to the head. Clean. Precise. Almost too perfect. The Americans bury the mission in classified reports for a while, trying to hide just how deeply they'd cracked Japanese codes. But eventually, the story comes out. And it feels almost mythic. A warlord brought down not by clashing fleets, but by data, math, and 25 carefully timed minutes of air superiority. Yamamoto's death hits Japan hard. Morale plummets. His ashes are returned to Tokyo in a black lacquered box, paraded through a city already fraying at the edges. He receives a state funeral. But there's no replacing him. Quirky side note. In his youth, Yamamoto lost 2 fingers in a naval battle, yet he still became an expert kendo practitioner and poker player. Try hiding a tell with only 8 fingers. His death closes a chapter, not just for Japan, but for a style of warfare that once honored duels, rituals, and strategic nuance. From here on, it's total war. Firebombing. Atomic hellfire. The myth of the noble battle burns out with him. You hike into the jungle to the memorial site. It's quiet now, just a rusted propeller, a weathered plaque, and the murmur of birdsong. The kind of place that humbles you, even in its stillness. You think of how far the ripples of one man's decisions reached. From Pearl Harbor to Midway to here. And now, the sun begins to dip behind the trees. The war barrels on. But Yamamoto, calm, brilliant, reluctant, is gone. The world kept spinning, of course. But it spun a little colder without him. And now, you lie back, letting the rhythm of your breath slow with the tide of the stories you've just traveled through. From sharpened blades to jungle vines, from marble halls to battle-scarred skies, you've walked beside some of the most legendary figures in history. Not in their triumphs, but in their last moments. Strange, isn't it? How death, final, inevitable, can echo through the centuries, shaping how we remember not just how someone lived, but what they meant. For some, it came like thunder. For others, like a soft, sorrowful breeze. But always, it came. These weren't just deaths. They were endings so large, so strange, so human, that the world had no choice but to keep whispering them. They weren't the end of the story, just the final punctuation on the chapters that came before. So now, sink a little deeper into your blankets. Let the swirl of images fade like smoke from an ancient battlefield. Picture the last flicker of candlelight in a darkened hall, or the final echo of a name carved into stone. You're safe. The noise is over. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember, even history's biggest names had to sleep sometime. Sweet dreams, you little time traveler. You made it all the way through.